Alright, when I started as a English teacher, I taught English for a year. Like most youth, I started off being very idealistic. I had very high expectations for both myself and for my students. I went to turn my students, I had about 90 students spread between grades 7 through 9. I wanted to take them in and make them better students, all of them, make them better students. And at the beginning of the school year, I remember I noted down some problem students, not necessarily because they had poor behavior, based primarily because they had a very poor grasp of the English language. They didn't know how to respond to, basic words that I say to them. So once I had that list, I began devising ways on how I can help these students, these weaker learners. And one of the methods I used was to have an unofficial study session during lunch. I'll tell these weaker learners to take their lunch and bring them so that we can study in an empty classroom. Of course, many of these students were resistant, and this was outside of my teaching hours, so this is something I did on my own initiative. I remember one boy in particular in the 7th grade. When I talked to him, given even a basic command, or a basic request rather, saying please stand up, he would respond to me in Thai, and wouldn't even say a simple okay. So it seemed like he didn't know what was going on in class. So I brought him into one of the unofficial lessons that I have, unofficial study sessions during lunch. And I found that indeed he was quite clueless. So most of my lunchtime study sessions I had with struggling students, they were with this one student, this one 7th grade boy I referred to that didn't know how to respond to a please stand up. It was between this boy and another boy. So these two boys, they were the majority of the study sessions that I held during lunch. And as I helped this boy, I remember that during class, his demeanor would gradually change. When I saw him in the hallways, he would say something to the likes of, "Teacher," then gesture to the classroom which I hold these lunchtime study sessions. He sat in front of the class, front center, closest to me, the teacher. He raised his hand even though he didn't always know the answer. He paid attention, which at that age, 12 years old, it's quite difficult to pay attention to someone, especially when you don't know what they're saying most of the time. So all in all, he just began trying. Instead of just sitting in the back of class and looking lost or talking with friends, he would be up front and trying to engage and learn as much as he could. In addition to that, I remember that this boy, he gave me a box of cookies, which I took a picture of, which I've never been a food person, but I was deeply touched by the thought that my extra effort that I was putting in was being appreciated. So I was helping this boy, and by the end of the school year, where I was only going to be teaching for 1 year, so I'll be leaving, I wrote this 7th grade boy, I wrote his mother a letter saying that I don't think it's a good idea for him to continue studying here because he won't be able to keep up. At least with me around giving him extra support, he can kind of muddle through the coursework, just kind of like how I muddle through guitar chords. Without me there going through the textbook very slowly with him, which is what I did during lunch, so that in class he had at least some idea of what was going on. 8th grade, with the materials much more difficult than 7th grade, it will be very difficult for him to keep up, and more likely than not, he will become lost, just like at the beginning of the 7th grade. So I told his mother that through a letter, and eventually I had an official parent-teacher conference with this mother. I met with the student's mother and aunt just to talk about his situation. And they were quite adamant about him staying at that school I was teaching in, and that he liked it there. The student liked the school. And even though I knew I wouldn't be teaching him next year in the 8th grade, so So I decided to write this boy a letter. I was telling him that I won't be there next year and I want him to study hard. Promise you study hard. You have to study harder than all your peers just to be able to keep up. So that was basically the gist of what I told him in that letter before I left Thailand. And lessons I took away from that. So I tried to help a lot of students during lunch. Well, quite a few that were weaker. A lot of them were unwilling, which it kind of peeved me at the time because I was putting in extra effort. I didn't have to do this. I was volunteering my time to help them, yet they didn't want to. I have a better understanding of it now, though, more than a year later. So as it was previously said, between a leader and followers, everyone has an expectation they're supposed to meet. And you as a leader, it's right to try and help your followers meet their expectations. Of course, there's more to that than just meeting expectations. Oftentimes, people that are not meeting expectations, it's because they are unmotivated. Motivation and success in reaching a goal, they are highly correlated. In some instances, they even move in lockstep. So therefore, trying to get someone to succeed in their expectations while they are unmotivated, well, that's counterintuitive. So you need to find a way to make them motivated. You find that incentive, a goal that they can reach, that they want to reach, and that is possible for them to reach. Once you have that, they gradually begin to move in the right direction between being motivated and being successful within that group dynamic. So that was the first takeaway I got from these unofficial lessons that I held as an English teacher during lunchtime. The second thing I took away was, the reason why I paid so much attention to this one 7th grade boy that was struggling. Well, I didn't really realize it at the time, but now I believe I did it because I saw myself in that boy, my younger self. I learned a foreign language growing up as well. So I learned Chinese, which I was never really good at. I wasn't good at learning a foreign language. And I struggled with it through my coursework. I was passed along from elementary to high school. If I didn't understand things, I would just be shooed along with a passing grade, or I would have someone beside me, a classmate, helping me. I suppose I had this negative experience of being just no one really there helping me to learn, not really. It was just being pushed along. I didn't want that to happen to someone else, and recognize this subconsciously. So I gave this boy what I didn't have, an advocate of someone that it believes that even though he's not the best student, doesn't mean that he can't do well in a class. And in a way, I was trying to shield him from a reality, same reality I face of you being your skill level in the language is at a 2nd grade level, but you're in the 7th grade, and it's highly unlikely you'll be able to catch up. I was trying to shield him from that. And something else I took away, part of the second takeaway, is I recognize now that in the 7th grade class I paid a lot more attention to this one boy I referred to in this video. And the last video I talked about the bubbly girl. So these two students I gave a disproportional amount of attention, while I also neglected a large section of my class. So I think it's important to do what I did of offering extra help. As you as a leader, you have to show that you care first before other people care. It's just like Jesus, famous story of Jesus, is he was washing the feet of one of his followers, which is what I did. What I did wrong, though, was I, again, paid attention to these two students. This boy I'm referring to in this video and the girl I referred to in the last video, the bubbly girl, and while neglecting large sections of my other class, which they found unfair, which I recognize now. And in addition to that, even though they were more difficult, it's important to spread out this humble service of trying to go the extra mile to help someone. Now, at the end of the school year, many of these students that I didn't pay enough attention to, just because they're difficult, that's not an excuse. Just because they're difficult, I didn't pay enough attention to them. They didn't like me very much by the end of the school year. Again, it's very hard to recover from a bad first impression. I didn't help them enough, but this was just 12 and 13-year-olds. If you had adults instead that you had to manage, lead, and look after, if you ignored large sections of them, you can have a mutiny on your hands. So the humble service of going the extra mile to help someone, you need to spread it out within the group. Use it like a surgical knife. Make key incisions that have the most effect in the shortest amount of time. Because your time and effort are limited, so it's important to invest it wisely.